So we want to begin by welcoming all the virtual members of Columbine United Church. Those of you who join us from literally across the United States, those of you who are here usually every Sunday, but you're playing hooky today, but you're tuning in, it's good to have you as well. Especially on this week when next week is Veterans Day, and we have many veterans who are watching us from around the world. We want you to know how important you are to us, and you always stay in our thoughts and prayers. Let's welcome these people with a warm compliment. Okay, it's clear. I have voice issues. Good news, I had a good set of tests at National Jewish this past week. They're getting it dialed in. It looks as though I have a pretty extreme case of asthma that was brought on by my pneumonia back in May. The really good news is they're getting me on the right steroid inhaler that is allowing me to return to a normal life as far as activity. Very excited about that. Bad part, the side effect, I'm one of the few people, rare side effect, is that the steroid takes vocal cords, takes your voice. There's some good news, keep on working with it. So you're gonna hang with me as I work through this. So you are going to turn up your hearing aids. And you are going to focus. You're going to listen, because I don't want to strain my voice as I relearn how to talk. And that's what I'm learning how to do, is I'm relearning how to talk. So our scripture reading this morning comes to us from the letter of Philippians, the first chapter, verses 12 through 14. Paul writes, I want you to know, beloved, that what has happened to me has actually helped spread the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard, and to everyone else that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers and sisters, having been made confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, dare to speak the word with greater boldness and without fear. Here ends the reading. Thank you. May God bless these words as we seek to apply them to our lives. Mr. Brown, stand back up. I want to thank you for sitting in for Mitch today while Mitch is on vacation. All right. The art of perspective. The art of perspective. Have you ever lost it? I mean, like lost it. Screaming, yelling, sobbing uncontrollably. Like the 2-year-old in the mall lost it. Whenever I'm in the mall and I see a kid doing this, I always want to say, you go, kid. You just do it. You get it out of your system. Because, the rest of us want to do it, but we can't. Justin tried it this past week. He just lost it, just on the floor, in the hallway. And Jane and I came up and said, dude, what are you doing? He said, I don't want to go to Presbyterian.
Don't make me.
Yes, I said, hey man, this doesn't work. I said, I tried it at council last month. They didn't go my way either. It doesn't work. But we want to, and yet you have to ask yourself, so what causes people to lose it? What causes it? I think there's several different things. I think that, something happens to somebody and the world tilts. It's a tragedy, something, too much stress, and the world tilts, or something happens and their life unravels. It was solid, it was held together, and life just unraveled. Or something happens, and they lose control. Let me walk you through this picture. As a horse person, let me describe the situation. Some bright obviously got married on the beach. Somebody thought, hey, this would be really cool. Let's put a woman in a satin dress and high heels on a horse for a picture. As a horse person, let me tell you what the horse is getting ready to do. The horse is launched back up on its rear haunches, and the legs are up. It's not going to bolt. It's going to buck. It's getting ready to do this and kick up with the back and then bolt. Let me show you where the bride's feet are not. They're nowhere near the stirrup. She is holding on to the cantle for all her life. Look at her back. She is leaning back, and her back is getting ready to be snapped. I looked all over for the next picture in this sequence. And the next second, she was going to be launched. She's going to be airborne. She lost control. Because look at the people around her. Everybody's lost control. You know, and sometimes life does this to you. You think you're on the horse, you think this is a really good idea, you think what you're doing is perfect, and all of a sudden, wham, wham. You know, I just heard this morning, after the 8 o'clock service, someone came up to me and said, Steve, I really need your prayers. Our friend, our relation, was feeling okay. Then all of a sudden had a bad stomach ache. They went to the doctor. Oh, they have colon cancer. They have colon cancer. Oh, unravel, world tilts. You lose it. I think what happens then is that you lose perspective. You're sobbing because your world is tilted, and you've lost the perspective that what it is that usually kind of grounds you and holds you together. And the hardest thing is, when people say to you, you've lost perspective, it's like, damn straight I have. My world life is not working anymore. And for me, perspective, regaining perspective is an art form. And that's why I wanted to include it in this sermon series, the art of. We've had a lot of fun preaching this past fall about, like God intends us to have this abundance. God intends us to have an abundant life. But we often lose how to do that. And for us, what we believe is that understanding this abundance is art. And perspective is an art form. One of my favorite sayings is perspective. Use it or lose it. Perspective. Use it or lose it. So what is perspective? What is perspective? Think about it. Perspective is what you use. It's very personal. What you use to frame your life. It's what you use to make sense. It's what you use to give you balance. It's what you use to guide you. It's how you understand what is the cosmos, what is God, and your place in it. And for the most part, that perspective works until something happens and you lose perspective. And and everybody has it. Everybody's gone there. Everybody's lost it. Is that then how do you regain perspective? What was really cool is that every single person in the Bible has lost perspective. Every biblical hero, Jesus lost perspective. He cursed a fig tree. He called the disciples idiots. He walked into the temple, got so angry that he flipped over tables, drove people out with a whip. I love those stories. Because when people say, well, what would Jesus do? Flipping over tables is a real possibility, for following Jesus. Yeah, let me tell you. The Apostle Paul lost perspective, biblical hero. Apostle Paul lost perspective. This is a picture from the movie Paul, and this is Hugh Jackman. If you don't know who Hugh Jackman is, he was Wolverine. And when I love this is because the Apostle Paul had his Wolverine moments. The book of Galatians is his Wolverine moment. There's little kids, so I got to be careful. He is so angry in the book of Galatians that he calls the Galatians fools. And then there are some people who have led the church of Galatia astray. And he says, he's so mad at them. He says, I wish you'd castrate yourselves. Now, once you dive into the Greek, you know that phrase has been cleaned up for the Bible. Just go to the vernacular of, I wish they'd castrate themselves. And then what I love about this picture is like, here, let me do it for you. But then when you read this letter, Philippians, Paul is very balanced. He is grounded. He has perspective. What's crazy is because he's chained. He's in a prison. He writes this from a prison cell. He's not writing because more than likely his wrists are chained to a wall and his ankles are chained. Somebody is feeding him. Somebody is cleaning him. And yet, while he's like this, he is very, very grounded. He has perspective. And people like to quote Philippians because of all the beautiful things. I think it's probably the most beautiful book in the Bible. They quote these different things. Isn't it beautiful? But I think what makes them beautiful is that I don't believe that Paul just kind of came up with these things on the cuff. That these are things that Paul had integrated into his own faith, his own head and heart, that he went to when his life tilted, when it unraveled, when he lost control, which happened throughout his life. And look at these phrases. This first one is from Romans. All things work for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. These next ones are from Philippians. Do not worry about what has happened. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let all of your requests be made known to God, and the peace that passes understanding will fill your hearts. And what I know is that Paul, because of all the craziness of his life, probably repeated these things over and over and over to himself. And by doing so, when he's like this, all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Rejoice in all things. He's just reminding himself of his worldview, of his understanding of the cosmos, of his understanding of how God works. And that's why I believe that one of the greatest spiritual challenges we all have is to develop what is your perspective. Because when you lose it, the only way you're going to regain it is if you can define it before you lose it. Did you catch that? When you lose it, the only way you're going to regain perspective is if you define it before you lose it. And that's why, for me, it keeps on coming down to three questions. And you write these babies down. I'm going to post them on the internet probably tomorrow so you can see them. You have got to answer, what do I believe about God and how God works in the creation? What do I believe is my purpose and God's purpose for my life in the cosmos? What is my attitude toward life? If you need help answering these questions, I know a really good book. I actually know the author. But when you can write these down and know them and say, yes, this is me. So that when things tilt, unravel, launch, you can scream. Everybody gets to scream. Everybody gets to sob uncontrollably. But at some point, you got to get on with your life. You've got to get on with your life. You have got to get on with your life. The sun is going to come up tomorrow. You have got to find a way to get on with your life. You do that with perspective. And that's why, that for me, the beautiful thing about people of faith, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you do nothing more than read Philippians, it's really easy to find. Go to the middle of the Bible, find the middle, turn a chunk. You'll find the 4 guys you went to school with, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then you start digging around, flipping around, you find letters. Look for the one, Philip, another guy you went to school with. Philippians. Read it. Think about a guy being in chains. And look at these phrases. If you did nothing more than ground your life in all things work for good for those who love God, are called according to his purpose. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I taught this one to my Kelsey, and she is in a doctorate program at CU, and she's on the medical center, a doctorate. I taught this to her in junior high. Do you know, she still texts me before a big exam, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. It's part of now her perspective. Rejoice in the Lord always. And sometimes you have to say that, rejoice in the Lord always. Let your requests be made known to God. And so when you're chained, the chains break. Because as people of faith, our perspective is that God is with us. And that God is working through the circumstances of your life. The first person, I forgot this. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It's perspective is infectious. It's infectious. That in the middle of something going nuts, and if you maintain perspective, and someone asks you, why aren't you freaking out? Well, I just happen to believe that God, is here and all things work for good for you, da-da-da-da-da-da. And that if you have perspective and you model that, it empowers other people to work to gain perspective. And sometimes they need somebody beside them, not telling them, oh my God, come on, you've lost perspective. Don't ever say that. That's patronizing. You ask questions like, I wonder what is the perspective on this? Encourage them to think. The person who taught this for me is my mentor, John Wilcox. This is not a picture of John, but I really like this guy's beard. He's a minister with a beard. It's No Shave November. No Shave November is to promote men's health, testicular, prostate, and mental health. And I've dedicated myself, and there's several of you who are joining with me in No Shave November. And I think I use this kind of as a fun way to talk about John. John died of prostate cancer. He was the minister at Central Presbyterian Church downtown. When I was a young minister, when I was in my 20s, he was in his late 60s, or about 62 rather, early 60s. He took me under his wing. We met regularly. He kind of taught me what it meant to be a minister. And John always talked about how much he was looking forward to his retirement. 6 months before he retired, he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. 6 months after he retired, he was gone, he was dead. I'll never forget his memorial service at Central Press downtown. Boy, did I not want to go. I was so angry. It's like I went as a young guy, I went and I sat in the balcony at Central, last row, thinking, God, this is so unfair. He's worked his whole life as a minister for your church. No retirement. Place is packed. And they said that for the eulogy, they had something special. And John, being John, recorded his own eulogy before he died. And they played it. And his voice came over, and his voice came over, started crying. And he said, hi, welcome to my memorial service. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today. He had a funny sense of humor. So I'd like to begin by reading from the book of Philippians, the first chapter, verse 12. Brothers and sisters, do not fear for what has happened to me. And he talked about using Paul's word, for what has happened to me has allowed me to preach the entire Praetorium Guard. And the brothers and sisters have now begun to preach the faith stronger because of my chains in prison. And John talked about because of his cancer, that he's able to reach out to so many more people that he would have never been able to minister to if he hadn't had the cancer. And he talked about how his cancer was a great blessing to him. And I remember weeping. And that my mentor in death taught me so much, so that now, 30 years later, that teaching is in the forefront of my mind. Especially as I forgot that slide. Especially as I deal with this. I'll let you get with this slide. Very funny, huh? So, it's been a long 6 months. My voice comes, my voice goes, my voice comes, my voice goes. Steroid, oh God, I can run. I was able to run for the first time. Running for me is my sanity. I haven't been able to run since May. When they got me on this steroid, I was actually able to go run. I ran for a minute. I was crying as I was running. So, you wouldn't believe the number of people who have come to me and said, oh my God, your voice. I've heard this so many times. What good is a preacher without a voice? And it's like, why aren't you freaking out? I am. I shut the door. I shut Justin's door. I sit and I cry. All things work to good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace that passes understanding will overcome your heart. So I've been praying. I have a really clear message back from God. A very clear message. Yo, Stephen, do you remember the story of Moses? He had a speech impediment. And that whole thing with Pharaoh, it worked out, didn't it? You're not as important as Moses. I got this. Stephen, remember? I sent Aaron. with Moses. I'll send you an Aaron. Okay. Who's an Aaron? Come on, God. I got to preach on Sunday. Where's my Aaron? You would believe how much of an improvement this is? There's a member of our church. His name is Jeff Steffen, sitting out here today. I would start crying. He called me. I can't do this. I'm going to cry. He said, and I was very talking. He said, look, I'm going to be in my office tomorrow. Come to my office tomorrow. I said, okay. So after an hour's work, he had me do all these stupid exercises. Make a horse sound. At the end of an hour, he taught me this. I haven't gotten it completely down yet. Sing my voice. If I start up here and sing my voice and drop down into my voice, there's my voice. Look at that. It still doesn't sound like my voice, but if I sing my voice, sing my voice, I drop down into my voice, and I have a voice. Isn't that amazing? Jeff Steffen, I'm going to give you a round of applause. But I have to think about it, because it very quickly wants to revert. Anybody's taught me is that your vocal cords within 2 weeks forget how to do it, and I can even feel it right now going back. And so I have to sing my voice, and drop down into it. And I was practicing, but Jeff is convinced that within a couple weeks worth of work, that my voice will return. Yeah, yesterday it was like, oh, and he says, don't do that kind of thing with your voice. And here's the powerful thing. It's infectious. This past week I was sitting with a church member who'd been in the hospital a long time. So much so that they were saying, that they were willing to give up, ready to give up. And I walked in and I didn't have a voice. This past week, it was terrible. It was terrible, terrible. Sing my voice, sing. There's my voice. And when I walked in, she heard me not be able to talk, and she said, oh my God, what good is a preacher without a voice? Stop saying that to me. You're freaking me out. And I said, she says, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to continue on. She goes, I said, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to have a life. I really believe all things work to good for those who love God or called according to his purpose. I'm praying. I keep on hearing it's going to work out. I really believe it will work out, and I'm going to continue on. So she was laying there in the bed. She said to me, if you can do it, I can do it. Jane texted me and said, the next couple of days, I think it was Friday, she's out. She's been released. She's in rehab. Perspective is infectious. But you got to get it first. You got to get it first. So when you lose it, you can find it. You got to believe that God's going to send you errands. Who are going to walk with you? Walk with you. Because all things do work for good. Do not worry about the things that have happened to you. Give to God all your requests, and the peace that passes understanding will fill your hearts. Amen.
Perspective. What's your perspective on this table? I was teaching the Tuesday morning class this past week, and I reminded them that the bread's from King Soopers. The juice is mass-produced in some factory somewhere. It's bread and juice. And yet, it's never just bread and juice. It's never me just grabbing a piece of it and tipping that quarter shot glass back there of juice and thinking, King Soopers. Jesus is here. Jesus is here. God's love is all around you. God's forgiveness can be tasted. God's grace can be imbibed. That's what Jesus was trying to tell his disciples on that night when he shared that meal with them. God is here. You can taste it. In everyday, regular events like bread and wine in your life. And so Jesus took the bread. And he held it up in the meal. And he broke it. And he gave it out to each and every one of them. He said, "Take, eat. This is my body. It is given for you. All of you eat of it."
In the same way, he took the cup and he said to them, "This cup is the new covenant sealed by my blood, given to you for the forgiveness of sin. Whenever you drink this, remember me." We celebrate an open communion here at Columbine Church. This table does not belong to us, nor does it belong to any particular denomination. But this table belongs to our Lord Jesus Christ, where all are welcome and all are invited. You do not have to be without sin, for God forgives our sin. And you do not have to be perfectly good, because only God is. You can be freaking out, or you can have it all together. But God invites each and every one of us to this table. So come in faith and know that you are loved, forgiven, and beloved by God. As you come forward to receive communion, if you wish, please stop at one of the candle tables and light a candle and say a prayer for yourself, for a loved one, or the world. Come, for all things are ready.